Good evening. Welcome to the Irish NFL show. It is me, Brian O'Leary, with Colin Cronin tonight. No Conor Brophy this week to host the show. Colin, it's great to see you. Week 5 doesn't seem too long since we started the season. Here we are already at week 5, just beyond the quarter stage, as they say, even though it's 17 weeks, 18 weeks, whatever it is these days.
Yeah, week 4 would have taken us to what, 23.5%. I was working it out, given it was the Broncos season. Look, this is the thing; it flies by, and the opening month is always a little bit crazy. You get to see, some things that make some sense, some new things, but an awful lot of teams kind of just settling down, and especially now when training camp and preseason are different, right? Over the last 5 years, they are different. They don't tackle in the same way in training camp. The starters rare, take a couple of snaps in preseason games. So really the first few weeks are ironing out a lot of the issues that some of the teams have. I think by the time we get to week 5, we will now have a real sense, I think, of where the league is at after, there'll be some teams that go on runs, there'll be some teams that slide away, but I think we'll have a much better sense after this set of games, Brian.
You put a percentage on that. You mentioned the Broncos. Are we suggesting that that's the Broncos season is over already? I certainly think maybe my team's season is over already. Are we back in that world again where we don't have much to play for? Us two in particular with our teams.
Well, I think you can add Conor Brophy and Shane Brennan to that list as well. I don't think the Bears or the Patriots are going to be, doing a whole lot when you consider. I think the Broncos, and we'll get to this later, but the moves this week, getting rid of Randy Gregory, I think is just a bloated contract, but an awful lot of rumors around trades. This is where we'll begin to see the trade stuff hot up, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if you were to see Jerry Jeudy probably the most likely to move on in the next couple of weeks.
You mentioned the Bears there. Obviously, the Bears are playing later on tonight in Thursday Night Football on the road against the Washington Commanders. A podcast for that game and preview is available. Myself and Andrew Morgan previewed that game last night. I can't say we were too excited by that one. I don't think many people are looking forward to this game, maybe with the respect of the Bears and Commanders fans. This is first segment. If you're listening on the podcast later on this evening or tomorrow morning, this is the first segment of the podcast. This segment is brought to you by RealPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. Check out their website, www.realpoint.com. Okay, Colin, let's crack on. I think we're going to talk about a better game now as opposed to our Thursday night game, and that is Sunday afternoon in Tottenham. I will be making the trip over on Sunday morning for that game, joining Andrew Morgan. And I'm very much looking forward to this one because the Jags rebounded well last weekend. Obviously, you were at that game in Wembley. I think they played in a manner which was, let's not have Desmond Ridder beat us, and it worked to a charm. And I think Trevor Lawrence had a nice serviceable game. I think he threw for 200 yards even. It was a respectful game for him, the touchdown to Ridley. And they're going up against arguably the hottest team in the league right now. And we touched on during the offseason and into training camps how the Bills would have been suited by all the kind of pressure and talk around the Jets and even the Chiefs, and the Bengals are obviously viewed as one of the teams that would be in the AFC running. People kind of tailed off slightly on the Bills. You said, no, they're a team to keep an eye on, in particular with Josh Allen. That's your MVP candidate for a year. What do you expect in this one on Sunday? Because right now, the Bills look like an offense that can't be stopped.
Yeah, I think the Bills are serious business. If I was looking for a musical equivalent of Josh Allen, it's Blur's song too, because it's crash bang wallop the whole way. He is fantastic. I was talking to JP Acosta just before we started going live, Brian, and that'll be going out a little bit later. He described the way Josh Allen behaves sometimes as a dog having the zoomies, where they just kind of lose the run of themselves and they don't even know what's going on. Usually they're very calm and collected, but all of a sudden they just go nuts. And I thought that was a wonderful way of describing Josh Allen. But he is my MVP pick. I think in terms of the QBs, I think it's between himself and Lamar. I think Christian McCaffrey has a real chance if he stays fit as well. But in this game, the Bills are coming in as the form team. And after that surprise in week 1, they've really found their mojo, I suppose. 37 points in each of the last 3. They are very streaky. Yeah, you missed it the other night. I talked about how Josh Allen can be a little bit like the way Wayne Rooney used to go on those goal scoring runs, where he'd get one and all of a sudden, he'd score for the next 10, 11, 12 weeks. Josh Allen can get hot like that. So it'll be interesting to see. The Jags, they got away with it last week. They got a functional win, right? They were the better team, but the Falcons were awful on offense. Myself and Shane were there, and Desmond Ridder he wasn't good enough last week. It'll be interesting to see if Arthur Smith can get a response. We'll come back to that. But the Bills are really good on both sides of the ball against the Dolphins. Obviously, losing Tre'Davious White is huge. Von Miller is back, though I don't think, I think they'll really ease him in. I think they have learned. Von Miller is December, January, and hopefully if you're the Buffalo Bills, February player. The Jags need to. It is what's interesting with the Jags. It's their intermediate game, probably more than anything, Brian. Right? It's anything kind of short game seems to be okay, other than some issues in the red zone. But the short game is okay. The deep ball is okay. That intermediate, anything between kind of 7 to 20 yards, that's the area they're really struggling in. It'll be interesting to see if the week in London will have been good for them, right? Because this is an experiment. I mean, they've been away for the longest now. Has that helped? I expect this to be a closer game just for the Bills, because coming off that Dolphins game, having to travel. But for me, the Bills should win this.
Yeah, interviewed Phoebe Schechter last night, obviously, who done the live show for us, face of Sky Sports, and she did kind of call out one of the key factors that has slightly gone under the radar this week because of the talk of the Bills' play and deserving play of last weekend's win, is the fact that the Jags have been here for 2 weeks. And this, as you said, this is the first time we talk about teams coming in on a Tuesday. Of late, both teams have arrived in on Friday the last couple of years, so there's no advantage there. But in this instance, they've been there for quite some time. They're used to the London surroundings. It'd be interesting to see what they're like on Sunday. And they have played in Tottenham. Let's bear in mind, they played there 2 years ago. They won that game with a last-second field goal. They're used to the surroundings. I know it's a different coaching staff, but a lot of those players are still there. So it will be interesting to see. But the Bills Mafia's coming to town. I would expect this game on Sunday to be a Bills or like home game. It is their home game, obviously, officially, but like the enormity of the game, they seem to be really kind of buying into coming over. I mean, I am surprised Von Miller's making the trip. I thought, not necessarily because they want him to play. Look, I agree. I think he'd be on a snap count, but more so, is it really worth putting him on a plane for 7 hours when he's going to be on a very low end snap count? Would he not be better off served to keep him for the following week and put him in then? But okay, I suppose there's a bit of togetherness about this team right now. It's the Bills for me. I do agree. I don't think it'll be a blowout type of team, but you said it there. You look at the Jags score lines, with the exception maybe of the Colts game, they haven't really lit it up on offense. And can they live with the Bills if the Bills get into that streak, which we've seen, how they started so hot against the Commanders 2 weeks ago in that 37-3 victory. They go out and put 48 points in the Dolphins. You'd imagine they'd be able to put up good scores on this Jags defense that's been up and down. And Josh Allen isn't rushing the ball as much as he was. And a lot that's down to the fact that James Cook is starting to kind of mature into the player that they thought he'd be. He was a third-round pick last year. Sorry, second-round pick. I think they're finally kind of getting the best out of him now. So I think we're both on Lions. I think Bills to win this one and march on. And then that leads us into the 6 o'clock slate of games. And the first game we're going to discuss is the Ravens AFC North clash on the road going into Pittsburgh. This game has slightly changed over the course of the last week. One, because Kenny Pickett is essentially struggling. I think it looks like he's not going to play. He's been ruled out, and Mitch Trubisky will step in. And looks like, despite the Ravens having a nice win last weekend, they were struggling with players out and absent. It looks like they're going to get a lot of them back this week. I touched on during the week, which is that it's unusual that you find 2 weeks in a row where you come up against a team where you're playing the backup quarterback. The Browns, obviously, Deshaun Watson removed last weekend prior to the game. They went up against a rookie. They beat him. Now they're going to go up against Mitch Trubisky, who's had his flaws over the last couple of years. Where do you see this one? Is it a game the Ravens should win, or are we in for one of those typical AFC North clashes? We just don't know what way it's going to swing in roundabouts throughout the course of the 3 hours.
Uh, I mean, the South Park had that "Blame Canada" song, and that is essentially for the Steelers. The I was saying, Brian, as you well know, I listen to a lot, as you do, a lot of podcasts on the NFL. Read a lot. There was so much optimism about this Steelers team coming into the season. But on the Ringer, they have been keeping tabs on how many games it is since the Steelers had a 400-yard game. It is now 39 games since the Steelers had a game where they had more than 400 yards of offense. And that is shocking, really. It isn't something you have to say. It is an indictment of Mike Tomlin as well, because he's allowed it to get that bad. And I rate Tomlin really highly, but they have enormous issues there. Nothing seems to get going. Kenny Pickett is QB1. Could the enforced change potentially be good in the short term? Right, just because things were so bad there. I don't know, though. They're going up against a Ravens team who I really like. I had Zay Flowers as my offensive rookie of the year. I think Lamar is fantastic. I think Lamar is reborn with the new contract. One thing I will note, because it came up on a podcast during the week on Richard Sherman's, where basically one of Jimmy G's former colleagues in San Francisco said he felt Jimmy could have suited up last year. Lamar took an awful lot of flack when he didn't suit up. Jimmy didn't. I think that's an interesting one. I think this will be a tough battle. Steelers are always best when they have their back against the wall, but this Ravens team look really focused. As I said, they seem to be getting some players back, and ultimately, I think John Harbaugh is an excellent coach. I think most of the time in the league, you win if you have the better QB. If you don't have the better QB, then you need to have the better head coach, or you need to get extremely lucky. I think ultimately the Ravens have the better QB. They have a 50-50 on the head coaches. The Steelers could get fortunate and win this, put in a performance with their back against the wall, but I have the Ravens for me on this one.
Lamar had 2 rushing touchdowns 2 weeks ago. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last weekend. How does the Steelers go about stopping him? Because Steelers defense has been up and down. I mean, the week 1, they were poor against the 49ers. They rebounded against the Browns. But last weekend against the Texans, I wouldn't say they were torn apart, but it was evident early on that they weren't at the same rate as they were in the previous week. Are you concerned there's an inconsistency? Because everybody talks so highly of this defense. This defense can take this team, whether no matter who's playing their quarterback. But we haven't seen it, maybe with the exception of that Browns game in particular, with the 2 defensive touchdowns. They're not right either. And I know everything's on the offense right now, and Canada's getting all the kind of, he's on the tough road at the moment. But is the defense at the level we should be seeing? And can they really stop Lamar if he continues to rush it because he's back rushing the way we saw early on last season?
I think sometimes players can lose somebody who is almost a talisman. I think losing Cam Hayward was huge. Yeah. And I think that possibly people underestimated just how big an impact that would have on the Steelers. I think his leadership, and I don't think they've been able to replace him as a player either. I think that is an area of concern, because he leads the defense and he holds things together, and he makes life so much more difficult for the opposition. They will have been hurt by the start of the season, and Tomlin will look to get them a response, especially in a tough divisional matchup. So I expect this to be a war of attrition. I don't think the Ravens will blow them out. I just don't. They probably don't. With that many players still out or coming back, they don't have the explosiveness to do that. But yeah, I mean, certainly this is a concern for the Steelers. I think, because they're not going to get Cam Hayward back for some time. And probably you're right, I think, Brian, in that the offensive struggles have been so bad that maybe the defense that usually is a top tier unit just hasn't quite been, where we would expect. It's been average. I think average is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, Ravens for me as well. So we're aligned on both games so far. I have a funny feeling we're going to be aligned on the next one, and that is the Carolina Panthers on the road against the Detroit Lions. Very impressive Lions win last Thursday night against the Packers. And on the show on Tuesday night, you did a great piece around the rookies and how well the rookies have been playing. And Bryce Young was the number one pick, but yet right now he's probably trailing third in those three particular quarterbacks of him, Richardson, and CJ Stroud in terms of how they're playing. This is a tough one to go on the road. Like Detroit is not like what it used to be in terms of you're going in there. This crowd, it's a sellout crowd now. They're all going to be up for it. The Lions look like they're going in the right direction. Any potential slip ups here? Are the Lions potentially looking a little bit too far ahead because they have some very winnable games coming up?
Like their complacency is an issue, and we've seen that time and again in the league, and the disparity between the best teams and the teams towards the bottom is never as big in the NFL as it is potentially in some other sports. You can have a bad day, sure, but it is the case of any given Sunday. It is the case that you have to show up. I think that it's not like the Lions have been immaculate this year, and they are still kind of working through things. So I would hope that for their sake, there won't be complacency. I think we saw Bryce Young take some baby steps last week. He was better at taking care of the ball. He's going to have to be. They will be raucous. Certainly the Detroit crowd. For Carolina, this was never going to be a season, really, right? They would talk that potentially they could win it, but it was always going to be growing pains because of where they were at. We've heard this week they are looking to bring in, and they've recognized they need to bring in additional weapons because he doesn't have, outside of Thielen, really anyone to throw to. And I just think that's probably a bridge too far ultimately. For the Panthers. The Lions have lots of talent, and I think they should have enough.
Yeah, the last time the Lions played at home, they held the Falcons to 6 points in a really dominant game. We saw Hutchinson getting 1.5 sacks last weekend in Green Bay. I think it was the second one of the opening plays of the game. Like, he's clearly starting to show the reason as to why he was picked so highly last year. The defense just seems to be evolving. We talk about Goff, we talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, Brown, all these very different players. The tight end, the rookie tight ends having a great season. Laporta. But defensively, they've been really strong. And I just find it very difficult to see how Bryce Young can go in there on Sunday. So that's 3 for 3. We're aligned. It doesn't normally happen this way. I have a funny feeling this might be the one that breaks the mold. This is the last game in the first segment. If you're recording by podcast, if you're listening by podcast, that is the Texans column. Texans on the road, 2-2. Against the Falcons, looking to rebound off a difficult loss in London last weekend. I'll ask you this first. How long before Desmond Ridder is ousted, Taylor Heineke is back in like a Washington Commanders style thing where he comes in, takes over? Because last weekend he really struggled. I don't know if it was the nature of the game. But they are at home. The expectations are a little bit easier for them to play in Atlanta. They'll have the running backs, out there gunning. They seem to do strong things at home. They won both their home games so far this season. Will they continue that? Will it be 3 in a row? Or do you think Texans are primed for another win on the road?
I think in terms of Desmond Ridder, he has a head coach who, I've said it before, he knows his mind. Whatever you think of him, it's a bit, Arthur Smith is Arthur Smith, and he isn't going to particularly care. If you remember the video for Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve, where Richard Ashcroft is walking down the street and he's just knocking into people, that's Arthur Smith. He's just going to do his own thing, and he is not going to be dissuaded from that. But Ridder is a real problem. The absence of Kyle Pitts is a real problem. They have an incredibly exciting back in Bijan, and it's difficult to overstate just how good he is. And when you get to see him in person, the way he makes players miss is he just is gifted. Like the stadium, like the excitement, but equally the concern from Jags fans whenever he got the ball in his hands was palpable. But it's not sustainable to try to win without a QB. They need Ritter to show a lot more in this game. And I was hopeful. I was very excited by the Falcons before the season. I thought he could do enough, but I don't see it now. And I see in CJ Stroud a player who has really now look, we have seen this before. Sometimes rookie QBs come in, all goes well for the first few weeks. He needs to show it's a tiny sample size, but has he done everything that has been asked of him thus far? Yes, all that and more. And they appear to have done a good job of actually putting some talent around him. And he just is really good in terms of his feel and his anticipation, the way in which he gets when pressure is coming at him. And D'Amico Ryans is proving to be the inspirational leader that we heard. I'm going to say that the Falcons are going to continue to struggle to score points. I can see the Texans getting a surprise here.
I'll go Falcons, and more so. I totally agree with you on the quarterback situation. I think I don't think I was as high on him as Connor was. Connor felt that Desmond Ritter would fit into this team. I think he selected him to win the division. I was never sold on it because he played 4 games towards the end of the last season. There was more sample size on him than was on the likes of Sam Howell, and he only threw one touchdown, and that was in the final game against the Cardinals. He just doesn't strike me as the guy that can lead his team in the long run. I think Taylor Heinicke will be suited to the situation when he comes in at some stage. And I think he will. But I do think they'll find a way to get over the line in this one. I think more so because the running game. I think Texans will do well. They put up a good fight. I think defensively for the Falcons, I think we'll see a bit of a reaction to last weekend's loss as well. I'm going to go Falcons. You go Texans. That ends the first segment on the podcast. This segment was brought to you by Real Point, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. Check out their website, www.realpoint.com.